You know when you go to a restaurant and you eat something amazing and you're like, I'm gonna need to learn how to make this at home because this is my new favorite thing and I'm gonna wanna have this all the time. But then you get home and you try to make it and it doesn't taste anything like the food that you had when you were at the restaurant, and you're like, what kind of magic Houdini chef took these very similar ingredients and made it taste completely different? And that can be a really annoying feeling, but I've worked in restaurants for a really long time, and I can tell you that there are definitely some tips and tricks that restaurant chefs do that are actually pretty easy. So I came up with this 3-part series where I'm going to be showing you how to make a restaurant quality appetizer, entree, and dessert, and kind of sprinkle in some of those tips and tricks that I've learned from working in restaurants along the way, so that you guys can really kind of make fancy looking food that looks and tastes really impressive but is super easy to make. And today I'm going to be showing you how to make an appetizer, and this is my take on carpaccio. So I hope you guys are excited, and let's get started. So for this, you're going to need 1 carton of mushrooms. This is going to be about 10 to 12 button mushrooms, and you want to slice them as thin as you possibly can, and also make sure that they're dry so that they don't have any extra moisture on them. Then I'm going to go ahead and add 1 large clove of garlic that's finely chopped, along with 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar, and 1 teaspoon of maple syrup. Next, we're going to add some flavor with half of a teaspoon of ground coriander. You could also use half of a teaspoon of dried basil if you don't have coriander. And then we're going to give this a subtle kick with about 1/4 of a teaspoon of red pepper flakes. This doesn't make it spicy so much as it really just kind of rounds out the flavor. Then we're going to season with some pepper. You don't want to add salt just yet because that will draw the moisture out of the mushrooms, and so we're going to wait till after they cook. So just do a generous pinch or a couple grinds like I did of black pepper, and then stir this to combine. I'm going to let that marinate, and in the meantime I'm going to go on to step 2, which is to make our pickled red onions. We're going to take half of a cup of thinly sliced red onions and mix it together with 3 tablespoons of white vinegar and 1 teaspoon of maple syrup. Then I just give this a good seasoning of some sea salt. I just do a couple grinds from my grinder, stir it all together, and let this sit for like 5 to 10 minutes. And what happens is that sharp, strong onion flavor totally goes away and is replaced by a sweet tang that has a subtle crunch. It ends up being so delicious. And side note, this is really good on everything from salads to sandwiches, so make a little extra while you're doing this and you won't be sorry. And at this point, you can go ahead and take your marinated mushrooms and put them on a nonstick pan. I like to line my pan with some parchment paper just because it really prevents sticking, and these mushrooms are very thinly sliced. Then you want to make sure that you spread them out into a very even layer so that everything can brown evenly, and pop them into a 375-degree oven for about 10 to 12 minutes until they are golden brown. In the meantime, we're going to go on to step 3, which is to make our crostinis. And for this, I'm just going to take some sourdough baguette, thinly slice it, and then I'm going to rub it with an actual garlic clove. This is a really cool technique that adds a nice subtle garlic flavor, especially when you add that salt and pepper. It goes from just being a regular old piece of toast to something that is more fancy and like a crostini. And something that I've learned from working in restaurants is that you have to add flavor as you go. You kind of season as you go and layer on the flavors, and that's really what makes restaurant food taste like restaurant food, because every step of the process is well seasoned and flavorful. While that bakes for about 5 to 10 minutes to crisp up, I go ahead and make the sauce. And for this, I'm just going to use some unsweetened coconut yogurt. You want to make sure that it's unsweetened, otherwise it's going to taste very strange. And I just mix that with some fresh herbs. Fresh herbs are another really great trick for those of you who are trying to make restaurant style food at home, because they add so much flavor, and I feel like they're often overlooked when we're cooking at home. They also have a ton of nutritional benefits, just side note, but what I like to do is take a small handful of parsley, a small handful of cilantro, and about 4 to 5 mint leaves, and finely chop that. Then I'm going to add about a tablespoon of the herb mixture to the carton of yogurt, along with some sea salt and freshly cracked black pepper. Then I just stir this around, and that is the sauce done. I'm going to use the rest of the herbs later on as a garnish, so just set those aside and don't discard them. I'm just going to make the most simple mixed green salad with some arugula. This is about 2 handfuls of arugula, and I'm going to add half of a teaspoon of olive oil. This is optional, but it just adds a really nice texture, along with the juice of half of a lemon and some sea salt. Then I'm just going to stir that together with a fork just to make sure that it's well combined, and then we're going to add those marinated onions from earlier. This adds a beautiful pop of color, which again is really important for when you're making restaurant type food at home, because in restaurants restaurants, they really focus on the visual and the presentation just as much as they do the flavor. And so color and complementary color, like this dark green with this rich purple, is a really great way to kind of make your food look fancy, even though it's really actually only onions and lettuce. Now for the fun part, it's time to assemble. So I'm going to take the mushrooms and the crostini out of the oven. As you can see, they really do shrink in size. They become really delicate, and I'm just going to kind of scrape them with a spatula and then place them in the center of the plate. And I kind of just make a mound like this, and then using a fork or a spoon, I'm just going to kind of fan them out a little bit. And you can kind of just make sure that you have a thin layer on the bottom of the plate. Again, presentation is important, so find a plate that you really like. It doesn't have to be fancy. This one's from Target. I think it cost around $2, but I think it looks really nice, and especially having a white plate like this kind of frames the food. So if you're cooking for someone you want to impress, using a white plate is just going to make it look really clean and professional. And something that's really important here is to go ahead and season well with some salt and pepper. You remember we didn't salt before because we didn't want them to get watery in the oven, but now is the time to really add flavor, and it's a super important step. So sprinkle this generously. And then you're going to take the lettuce that we made from earlier, the arugula salad, and put that right on top. And as you can see, this already looks so beautiful, and even though it's just mushrooms with some salad on top, it looks really, really professional. Then I'm going to take the crostini, and even though I ended up using way more than just 4 pieces, I just wanted it to look cool, so I just did 4. And then I sprinkled the sauce on top. I kind of drizzled it with a spoon. You want to do this slowly and deliberately so it doesn't look like all messy, because that's another thing. When you go to a restaurant, you eat with your eyes first, so you want to try to make sure that it looks pretty. You can also just serve the sauce on the side. And then I'm going to finish this with something that's also very important, which is garnish. We're going to garnish with some fresh lemon zest, some red pepper flakes for a pop of color, and just a little bit of those fresh herbs that we chopped up from earlier. This really isn't just about the way it looks, it adds another layer of flavor. So every step of the way we've added flavor all the way into the very top with the garnish. And that is a big trick of mine when you're trying to make restaurant food at home. So what you're going to do when you serve this is you kind of take the crostinis and you make a little bite with the salad and with the mushroom and with a little bit of the onion and the sauce. It is the perfect bite, and the textures and flavors are so interesting and so dynamic. This with a glass of white wine or something sparkling on a date night, or even just for a movie night if you want to treat yourself, is so decadent, and as you can see, actually really easy. So that's it for this recipe. Make sure you tune back in tomorrow to see the entree and the next day to see the dessert. And if you like this video series, go ahead and share it with your friends. Give it a thumbs up because that helps more people find my channel. And I will see you guys back here tomorrow. Bye.